Good Tuesday morning to you, the 3rd of August. We are continuing with our series from Colossians 3 about the clothes that we put on. We've already talked about putting on compassion, kindness, and then humility. And the last week we talked about meekness. And today we're going to talk a little bit about one that I think we all struggle with from time to time, some of us more than others, patience. But I want to start off with a little funny joke for you. So I heard this story about a lonely guy who decided that he thought life would be better if he got a pet and brought it to work with him. So he went to the pet store and talked to the pet store owner for quite a while to decide what kind of pet that he wanted to buy. After some discussion, kind of figuring out what his lifestyle was all about, the guy decided to buy a centipede, which came with this neat little white box that the centipede used as a house. He took the centipede home and found a good location for it, and then decided that he would start off the new relationship with taking the pet for dinner at a restaurant. So he leaned over and he asked the centipede, "Would you like to go to dinner with me?" But there was no answer from his pet. This bothered him, but he waited a little bit, and a few minutes later he asked again, "Hey, how about going out for a meal with me?" But again, there was still no answer from his new friend. So he waited a few minutes more, thinking about the situation. Then he decided one more time, but this time he was going to put his face right up against that little air hole for the centipede's house. And he shouted in, he leaned in, he shouted in, he said, "Hey, in there, would you like to go have dinner with me?" And almost immediately he heard this little voice come back from the box say, "Patience, man. I heard you the first time. I'm putting on my shoes." And as funny as that may be, patience is sometimes very hard for many people. From driving down the highway, come along, lots of traffic, somebody slow in front of you, somebody cuts you off in a grocery line, or the lines are really long. We can become annoyed and irritated at the delays like this, and we get worked up, and we become very impatient. Patience is a virtue that comes hard for many of us. It's a quality we admire in others, perhaps the driver behind us, but we can't stand it in the driver in front of us. Patience is difficult because our pride, our selfishness, and anger stands in between us and patience. Many of us have to admit that we find it difficult to be patient. The most important step, though, that we can take in developing patience is giving God control of our lives, which for most of us isn't really that easy either. Many of the people we must deal with from day to day, and sometimes even the ones we may live with, can be obstinate, frustrating, selfish, inconsiderate, and absolutely impossible to please. Well, guess what? We can be like that too. But I think we need to realize that patience flows from understanding. We are too quick to judge, and we are too prone to treat others harshly. They too have troubles paying bills, sick kids, spouses to plead, bosses to impress, other burdens to bear. But let's try to remember that God is patient and long in suffering. We need to give one another a break. Think about the patience that God has shown us and all of humanity throughout creation. What patience teaches us is that God is still at work. He hasn't finished with us yet. He is working in our world, and He is working in our lives, testing us sometimes, making us to think through issues. Sometimes, though, it is tough to believe. We've waited and waited and hoped and prayed, and things still have not changed. That new job hasn't happened. Loved ones are still sick. Situations are still the same. But patience teaches us that God is still at work. And as hard as that may sometimes be to learn, that's the most important lesson of all. But it's tough, isn't it? The story that is told by the great 19th century New England preacher Philip Brooks, who was usually a very patient man, was unusually frustrated and aggravated one day. This is the man that wrote O Little Town of Bethlehem and was normally a very calm and controlled person, the sort of man who could write, "How still we see thee lie." But this day, this one particular day, he was irritated. And when a close friend asked him about it, Brooks said, "Well, I'll tell you, I'm in a hurry, and God isn't." Does that sound familiar? Peter tells us in the New Testament that 1,000 years is like a day to God. Sometimes we want God to act, and to act right now. And though we have to believe that God is acting, it's difficult to see all the time how he's acting, because it may not be in the way that we are expecting him to act. Patience teaches us to wait, to remember that God is in charge. Think of it this way. Every time you or I lose control or patience, we are effectively saying, "I'm in control, God's not." We're taking God out of the driver's seat and putting ourselves in it. And I know that when I take control and put myself in the driver's seat of my life, I tend to make a mess of things. Patience is a hard thing to create. It is virtually impossible to make yourself be patient. We cannot produce patience on our own. As we mature in our Christian faith, as we learn to trust more and more that God is really in charge and of the world in our lives, the patience that is the fruit that grows as a natural result of our relationship with God. Remember, patience is a fruit of the Spirit. In Galatians 5:22, God's Spirit makes us patient. It's a fruit that God will grow, and he grows that fruit as we grow in him, as we learn to trust him, as we learn to rely upon him, and as we learn that God is always and will be in control. Let me leave you with this thought from Psalms 40, verse 1. I waited patiently for the Lord, and he turned to me, and he heard my cries. May you be patient with yourselves and one another as God has been patient with you. Have a blessed day.